Welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we have a look at a favorite of mine, the 1969 film, The Haunted House of Horror. This is episode 389. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So, warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castle Bridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, which you can find at Global Comics. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
I am also currently wearing a turtleneck and a pullover in honor of the clothing in this movie.
Man, the clothing. Thank you for saying that. I approve of your choices wholeheartedly. And finally, also in Denver, another person whose choices I get my approval wholeheartedly. Color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello, I am not wearing a beehive wig, but I wish I was.
Man alive, the clothes, right? I love we'll get into it, but I really love the dress that Sylvia wears that's made up entirely of triangles. I mean, it is the most.
I think he loved it a little bit more once he realized there was nothing between the triangles.
No, but it's like it's such a like a perfect like go-go dress, you know?
Yes.
Oh yeah, she is go-go.
Yeah,
Go-go-licious.
She's go-go-licious.
Go-go-licious.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, The Haunted House of Horror, also called a horror house, which is what I saw it. I saw it as horror house. It was originally written as a screenplay called The Dark, which was very different from the film that we have received. This is a 1969 British horror film directed by Michael Armstrong and starring Frankie Avalon and Jill Haworth as young adults, whatever that is. They're youngish people looking for thrills, spending the night in an old mansion in the English countryside. The film's tagline was "Behind its forbidden doors, an evil secret hides." People have called this a grindhouse movie, a drive-in movie. They've called it a slasher, a proto-slasher. It's a horror film. It belongs here. And I am so thrilled that we have a chance to talk about it, even though I do not require that you guys love it. So let's get our opening thoughts. Julia, Tony, Drew, and then I'll go. Julia, aren't you glad that I introduced you to The Haunted House of Horror?
I actually found it entertaining, but really dumb in a lot of parts. That was kind of, I kept going, okay, this is really, really dumb, this part. But there was a lot of neat stuff. Like there was, as we've been talking about, the clothing is really fun to look at. Some of the set pieces are really interesting. The characters, I mean, I think they're really pretty interesting characters. Like they have, they're differentiated and you kind of get the relationships, even though some of the relationships are very strange. The ending is interesting. I know we'll get into that and is pretty well done. But gosh, there's a lot of dumb stuff in this movie. Especially a lot of the choices that the characters make, you're just like, why this? No. I don't know, but so it's definitely kind of a up and down all over the place kind of film.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Let's see. What did I say? I said Tony. Tony, first of all, is this really your first time watching A Haunted House of Horror?
Yes, actually. I don't know how. I mean, it seems like something I would have caught at some point.
Do you think it would have played?
Quentin Tarantino brought it to Austin in 1996, so I would have thought you guys would have been.
Wait. I don't think that possibly wasn't when the Draft House was hosting.
No, that was at the
Tarantino
Dobie,
Fest.
and I don't think Tony was here yet.
Oh,
No, I got here in 96. I got to Austin in 96, but the Dobie was still kind of a drive, and if you went to the Dobie, it was a pain to park.
Yeah.
Although I was first introduced, this is a total side note, I think the first movie I saw in an art house at the Dobie was City of Lost Children. And I fell in love with the Dobie. I think they played some like Tom Waits music before it. Like it was a whole thing.
That's where I saw Mind Walk and loved it. Fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Dobie was a heck of a theater. I mean, although it was crazy that it had columns in the middle of it holding it up.
Yeah,
so,
when you got the good theater, it was great. When You weren't in as good of a theater. It was not as good, but it did solidify like this Austin's where I should be. Like
Yeah.
the memories of it and the way that all of that stuff was like I get to see like in City of Lost Children is an amazing movie.
Mhm.
So all of that, yeah.
But
Um
I interrupted your opening thoughts. Sorry.
no,
Yeah.
I mean, that's okay. I think it's not probably a movie I'll rewatch a lot. But it has some really fascinating bits in it. And again, I'm a big horror genre, like weird B horror kind of thing. It's a super mod horror film
Yeah.
full of a lot of really unlikable people, unfortunately. Like, but some just bizarre choices throughout it. It's also to me one of the most Italian style British movies I've seen. Like the way it's shot, the pacing, and just the reveals, like all the bits has a lot of that kind of what we talked about as dream logic kind of feeling that you'll see in a lot of Italian horror.
Mm.
And I don't even mean necessarily like I don't want to overuse the word giallo, which kind of has become more of a catch-all, kind of term, and that's okay. But it feels if somebody said, "Oh, this Italian director was the person who put this together," it has that flavor, which doesn't always happen. I found that to be fascinating. Also, weird choices like, "Hey, the knife is going to be this kukri knife," like.
Yeah.
Like it's just I don't know. There's a lot. It would make to me it would make a fascinating Q&A. I was like, hey, what is that? I mean, it could be just the prop department. That's what they had, or it could be like, hey, that looks cool, right? Because it does look cooler than just a machete. But just choices, and how to make an interesting thing out of a cast full of just I don't even remember one character that I like at all in this movie, which
I would
makes you a little hard
love.
to empathize with the characters.
I mean, Michael Armstrong, the director, is alive. He's 78 years old. I have no idea how healthy he is, so I don't know if he does interviews or what. But he does a lot of writing on his website. A lot of it I have not read yet on the sources of this film, and I would love to hear a lot of that stuff from him because and we'll get into that stuff. Drew, what are your thoughts?
You know, there were times when I was watching this that I was really into the groove of the movie, and then there were times that it just lost me. There's definitely some pacing issues with it, which isn't unusual for a horror movie from this time period of this particular type. I do think it's going to be an interesting movie to discuss because outside of like the clothing and everything, it's got an interesting atmosphere. It's got that sort of English dreariness about it that I like, and
Yeah.
I think that the fact that they emphasized that, despite the fact that it's kind of supposed to have this party atmosphere, was a interesting choice. Frankie Avalon is a bit fascinating to me in this movie. I would love to know how he ended up in it. I think he looks just like John Romita Sr.'s version of Peter Parker in this, like right down to like the clothing choices. So I got a big kick out of that. I also there's like a couple of scenes in this that I think are very tense and very interesting. And also the idea of like what a slasher movie was prior to Texas Chainsaw Massacre and prior to Halloween. I think that this would be a good example to actually show somebody to be like, okay, this is before all the tropes were cemented in this particular subgenre. This is what these movies were like. But I didn't hate it, didn't love it, but I'm looking forward to talking about it because I do think there'll be a lot of interesting discussion to be had.
I'm with you there.
There is I just want to two thoughts. The first quick thought that I wanted to say in my opening thoughts is that there is a lot of writing that Michael Armstrong has done about the sources of this. I'm going to try to make casting feints towards that stuff, not having had a chance to dive deep into the research because I wasn't able to bring it up. The website for me appeared to be down, and now today I've been able to access some of it, but there are volumes and volumes of research about how this movie came to be the way that it is. So I have a feeling that in this conversation, we will ask a lot of questions like, why the hell did that happen? We're going to have to just guess at it. Whereas I think it is possible that in the reams of stuff that Michael Armstrong has written, because he's been a director for a really long time. He directed this when he was in his 20s. There's a hell of a lot out there that probably answers some of our questions, but we don't know all that stuff, so that's okay. I wanted to watch this movie because, first of all, I play this movie in the background a lot without actually paying close attention to the plot or the script. So watching it today with Julia was the first time I've actually watched it like eyes wide open, not looking at anything else, just paying attention to the plot and following it, which is very different from my first time watching it at the Tarantino Fest back in '96 and various times since. And it's really strange. But actually, the first time I watched this was on our farm when I was a kid, because this movie came out in 1969, and then sometime in the early '80s, I caught it at the farmhouse, which means the movie was like about 12 or 13 years old. It wasn't even all that old at the time, and I watched it on a tiny little TV upstairs on our just remote farm in the middle of Oklahoma, and I thought it was really freaky, and so it's kind of stuck with me. Okay, so first off, this film is one thing I really love about it. I want to talk about, is this is this a slasher movie? But before we do that, I just want to mention, so a brief summary of the plot is that Frankie Avalon is what appears to be the alpha dude in a group of rather smug, self-important, fabulously dressed young people who hang out and work in the shops of literally like swinging London, like the kind of swinging London that like Austin Powers was commenting on, like the real deal. Turn on the camera, point it at London. This is it, because they've got the dancing and the nightclubs and the go-go dresses and the high boots and everything. And I there are very few movies I've seen that capture this look quite as well as this one does. Did anybody am I the only person who does this, where to me I was just looking at it wanting to Instagram the whole movie? In fact, I think I did Instagram a lot of the movie with just like the fashions. There's a point when Frankie Avalon is talking to a police detective, because the plot of this involves one of their friends gets murdered and they're involved in the police. The police are asking questions. There's a scene where a police detective is asking Frankie and his girlfriend Sheila questions, and they choose to shoot the scene at a nightclub for no reason that I can perceive, other than it allows yet more awesome swinging '60s clothing. I don't know, that it might be
The
I'm the
whole
only. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, the whole police thing, the whole the murder, starting with the murder and going from the murder pretty much to the very last scene of the movie. It's one bad decision after another. Like, why? I don't know if you want to start there, if you want to, because
You can
you're
go
just kind of.
anywhere you like. Go ahead.
I don't know if you want to start with the plot, or if you want to, if you're, because you want. It sounded like you were trying to stick with like
No,
set
no,
or whatever.
that's probably all I had to say. I just wanted to, if you want to see a movie that shows swinging '60s London and you want to stick with your horror movie fealty, this is the film. This is the
Yeah,
film
because
for
even
you.
from the beginning, like right at the beginning, I like the opening, because right from the beginning, they're literally standing in front of storefronts with windows. So you're looking not only at the fashions of the people in the movie and in the street, but also the fashions on the mannequins in the windows, which
Yes.
is kind of cool.
Oh,
So
and
It's
that,
it,
yeah,
that's the first time. So we meet Sylvia, the lovely Sylvia, who is kind of the swinginest of the swinging '60s girls in this, and she is being stalked by
Bob.
Bob, her ex lover Bob, who is a gentleman who's older than this crowd. He dresses really well. He wears gloves.
and he has a great face.
Yes.
Like and I mean that in that, like, he is perfectly cast because he looks different than the
Mhm.
kids in a way that is like
Yes.
like he's got this, like, he's not ugly, but he's got all these acne scars, and like he looks so much more
He looks like a detective to me.
yeah,
Yes.
he's got a very patriarchal sort of feel to him, with like the trilby hat and like the dark coat and the dark gloves and the dark tie. And
Well, and the fact that he's always skulking around and
Yeah.
kind of, so it seems like he could be a detective or a private eye, but instead he's just a creepy stalker.
he's just
He's
creepy.
and we've, as is often the case, we've picked up their story at the end of their story. This actor is named George Sewell. Yes, he has a tremendous presence, but he's in a really shitty position because he's turned into a creepy stalker because he had a
Well,
lover. His lovers tossed
he's a
him
red
over.
herring. He's a red herring.
Yeah. Right.
Like
Now,
they're
plot-wise-
trying
Spoiler,
they're trying
spoiler.
to leave.
Yes.
Whatever. Like
Yeah, I know.
But that kicks us off is that Sylvia is unhappy because she's being stalked by her lover that she has dumped, and they have a number of tense conversations because he's just stalking her, and he
Well,
says something like, "Wherever you go, I'll be there," and she's like, "Fine, you'll get very bored," which has to be true because
Yeah.
he really does seem to be putting all of his time into this
But
project.
to Drew's point about the red herring thing, this movie, that's one of the problems with the movie, is it's filled with red herrings, and it's not like twisty, it's not suspenseful, it's just like, what? Oh, she's getting in the car with him. Oh, that's it. He dropped her off.
the
Like, it's fine.
mystery,
You know, like, oh, this is happening. Like, it's like, oh no, I guess that was nothing either.
the mystery
Oh, he's following
part
her.
of
She's
this.
walking in the dark woods. Oh no, she's fine.
It's hop scares instead of jump
Yeah.
scares, right?
That's a really good point. There are a number
the
of
mystery part
yeah.
of this is very terribly constructed. Like,
Yeah.
like if they were if you know, like the thing is about what, you know, these kind of movies often were at this point in time. You know, a lot of the times they tried to be whodunits, but like it at no point in time is there like you can't really watch this movie and start collecting clues and deduce
Right.
who
That's
the
a really good
killer is
point.
going to be. So it doesn't work on that
There's
level.
like two clues, and that's it. You know what I mean? There's the fact that the guy who actually did it tells the story about the house, that he's been to the house before. Oh, okay. And that was like, and then there was like one other thing that he says later.
Well, there's also a bit of fainting towards a possible, culprit, that it might be Sylvia's stalker, because he becomes super worried that she left a lighter that he gave
Right.
her at the house, and you're like, maybe he's worried about evidence being left behind.
Yeah, that it's
Now
gonna track back to him.
let me tell you guys something that will blow your mind about all of this. All right, Armstrong writes a script called The Dark, okay? And it's basically a lot of what we see here, except for that what happened, and the way the movie happened, the way that it happened, is that American International Pictures puts up most of the money, but their demand is, we need you to take one of our major contract players. That would be either Fabian or Frankie Avalon, and they take Frankie Avalon. So Frankie Avalon becomes the lead. The killer, which is Richard, originally was to be a fabulous cabaret singer of ambiguous gender, and it was written
See, that
to
would have
be
been so much more interesting.
well, and he had the musical numbers and everything. He was written to be David Bowie. However, once Frankie Avalon was on board, they were like, there was a decision made that it wouldn't work to have both David Bowie and Frankie Avalon in this horror movie, and so instead we got Julian Barnes.
If David Bowie had been in this, this would be, instead of like a minor discussion thing, like this would be a bona fide cult classic.
Sure, absolutely. Especially if he was playing a gender bendy musician. I mean, of course.
Yeah, I mean,
that was definitely the wrong decision.
Whoever was making that, like, we can't have a Frankie Avalon and a David Bowie. Like, what? Why would you not hack it to the gills, my friend? Like, what?
I mean, I know they don't have a time. They didn't have a time machine, and they couldn't look into like the sensibilities of movie nerds in the 21st century. But
either way, man, if you have, and who knows, it could have fallen apart. It could have been like management was like, yeah, David Bowie with Frankie Avalon in there. We don't know if Bowie feels comfortable doing it. There's any number of casting things.
Frankie Avalon and David Bowie might have hated one another. We don't know. But so there was that. So there was the gender bendy Richard. There's a lot more weird sexuality going on, which you get hints of in the version that we see. But here's the other thing. Armstrong was young and had zero power. So after he turns it in, the studio hires yet another person to shoot a lot of new stuff. So there is there's an Armstrong commentary track that I haven't heard, but he will point out all the differences. But mainly, think of it this way: anytime you're seeing anything inside the mansion, Armstrong shot that. Anything at the parties and talking to the police and stuff like that, almost all of that was reshot. And a lot of it makes no sense with where Armstrong wanted the plot to go.
That makes a lot of things make more sense. Yeah. It certainly makes the pacing and the cuts make more sense.
It's remarkable, isn't it? I mean, and yet we have to take the film as it is, right? So and there are things that Armstrong shot that honestly. Then we have to lay it at his feet and go, the whole conversation where Frankie Avalon says later on, let's hide the body instead of going to the police.
Okay. I have like a whole, I was doing a lot of headcanon stuff when I was watching this, because I was taking like throwaway lines that people.
So explain to us how go ahead and talk to us about that and explain, why do they wind up in a situation where they have to lie to the police?
I think Frankie Avalon did not want to go to the police because he is a drug dealer. And there is stuff in the movie to back that up. He talks about how the police brought him in on a drug charge.
I just thought he didn't want to go back. Yeah, but to that, I just thought it was, you've already trumped up charges on me. I don't need to go back to the police, right? Like that.
But aside from that, though, like, he is an American in England, and not much is made of that. And somehow he is like the big kahuna of all these mod kids.
Right.
And I'm thinking like maybe because he's supplying them with drugs.
Well, clearly, yeah, go ahead, Tony.
It's possible, but I thought his popularity is more like, hey, he's the there's this guy who's like decently cool. Isn't it cool that we have an American that comes to our parties? He's kind of, everybody's playing each other as far as that goes.
But the part that, to me, that was part of it, was why on earth would they not call the cops? But also the fact that they're convinced that it's one of them that did it. Why? It makes no sense. I mean, I guess it turns out to be one of them. But it made no sense to me that they
walk
would
us
name it.
to how we got there. Just really quickly for the listener, how we got there.
So we're in the house. They're bored at this party, and so they're like, "Hey, I know," says Richard. "There's this haunted house that we could go hang out at." So they go there. And he says, "Okay, let's do a seance. I'm going to tell you, because this house is, a bunch of people, family was killed there. And then the guy killed himself after he killed the family. And so let's do a seance. Apparently the ghost that is around here is the ghost of the killer. So we should bring him back for some reason, which I don't understand." And then, so then they're like doing the seance. They kind of walk around. They split up, because that's what you do in a haunted house. Everybody goes in their own directions. And then the poor guy who's been macking with Sylvia, not to be confused with Sheila, because that was stupid. There's like 4 girls in the thing, and one Sheila. We kept forgetting which was which. Anyway, that guy gets horribly killed with this. What are you calling the knife?
It's a kukri knife.
Kukri knife. He gets killed with the kukri knife, blood everywhere. And then when they find him, they decide that, okay, we're not going to go to the cops. Frankie Avalon decides, we're not going to go to the cops. We're going to go again, split up, and go figure out to what end. Like, if it's one of you guys that killed him, why are you going to walk around the house? So I don't understand why they don't think that somebody else might be in the house already, like maybe somebody lives in the house or whatever. Why? And then
they've also shown that there is a fire escape.
Yeah, there's a
So,
fire
you know,
escape. So
you,
it's not
you could,
just the front door, like he says. Or B, why don't they just leave and then tell the cops about the body? So I like Drew's theory that maybe Frankie Avalon doesn't want cops involved at all because of criminal whatever. But the problem is at this point, Sylvia has left. Sylvia has been escorted, quote unquote, out of the house, but then invited to just go ahead and walk home by herself or walk to down the creepy, road. Her stalker guy, Bob, is outside. So
yeah.
that we're it's suggested that maybe Bob, and you think Bob's going to kill her, but he doesn't, because again, red herring. So she walks down the creepy road, he follows her in the day for night woods, and then she hitchhikes, and I guess she's fine because she gets home, it's no problem. So again, no red herring.
Thus making her the smartest person.
Exactly.
whole
But
damn
the problem
movie.
is, so now it makes sense that Bob would go back and kill the guy because that's the guy that was making out with his obsession. So that makes sense. That part does fit with the mystery. It's like, okay, maybe it's Bob. But if it's not Bob, then it doesn't make sense to me that it's any of the people in the group, because nobody's covered in blood and there was blood everywhere. And why
Yes.
couldn't there be somebody else? So all of those, every single choice that they make from that point forward, and every single thing that they think they know, just makes no sense. And then when they get back to town, they decide, like 3 days later, they decide that they're not going to tell Sylvia any of this, but they're all going to lie about having gone to the house because they got rid of the body. They buried the body. And so, but they don't tell Sylvia. So Sylvia, of course, says, oh yeah, we were all at the house last time I saw it. So it was like, wait, you guys were all at the house. Nobody else has told us this. It just makes no sense. It's like that whole plot is ridiculous to me.
Well, they're just bad decisions, but like
just bad criminals, or bad not criminals.
Which is why I had to, I guess, do a lot of mental gymnastics to make it make sense. But also, like, why are these kids hanging out with Frankie Avalon anyway? Not that I don't like him, but like he sticks out like a sore thumb. Like,
did you feel like he was age appropriate for them? I mean, they all seem about the
not
same.
really.
It's not so much his age, is it his he seems like he is from a different outside of the fact that he's American, like slightly different socioeconomic group. He's a lot more clean cut than any of the kids. Like, he's got his very boxy Peter Parker haircut, and
they're all quite mod. You're totally right.
I think
like he looks like Frankie Avalon. He looks like Frankie Avalon, the swinging surfer dude. Sorry, Tony.
Yeah.
No, I think that's why, like, when I looked at it, I just saw it as why he would be like, man, that guy's wild, man. Like, I can't believe he's kind of square, and like, but him being an American that makes him interesting in their social circle, because everybody else is this kind of libertine swinging late 60s, so swinging 60s are going to go out. But like, everybody in that thing, they're all bored with each other, and they're bored with the scene. And so Frankie Avalon, in his kind of square-y way in this film anyway, is something different to them. Well, and I think if he was an American who's like, hey, I get you guys, like, I'm also a rock star, and I have this, like, it wouldn't be interesting to them, or it would seem put on.
I think it's funny how
that's how I saw it.
I just want to mention, style-wise, it's interesting how these young people are kind of different from, I think, 22-year-olds today, because they are like doing their whole swinging 60s thing, but they're all square in a sense, right? I mean, some of them live at home, they're driving, one of them is driving a what is that, a Jaguar? I didn't even notice what there was. The Gary is driving an extraordinarily nice car.
Yeah, I think we looked it up, and it was a Jaguar.
They're all wearing sport coats. But they're not as square as the people who are just like 10 years older than them, like the younger cops who wear 3-piece suits and everything. So they're part of this. They're Arrested Development, really. They're kids. It's just they're too old for this stuff.
They seem a little like upper middle class to me. And Frankie Avalon gives off a more like American, work, like
That's
he seems
correct.
more working class than them, I guess. Like,
I think that's right.
and
Yeah,
he doesn't seem like square. Like
No, I get you.
he's
Yeah.
quite stylish, but like
Right.
it's not the same
yeah.
kind of stylish. And
And they did all get arrested. You're right. The dialogue, the one thing that it tells us about these people is that all of them got brought in last year on a drugs thing, whatever it
which
was.
I have a question about that and how it relates to Frankie Avalon.
Yeah.
And did he take this part possibly because he was trying to do something a little edgier in being in this?
I don't
Because
know.
like it seems like maybe that might have been a thought. Like, I'm gonna be part of this, horror movie. I'm gonna be hanging around with British kids. There's gonna
Yeah.
be talk of using drugs. It's much less camp
Right.
than I think of the Beach Party
Good Christ,
movies
yes.
being.
Yeah, this is night and day different from that. This is way, way, way more. We might think this is kind of silly, but it's way more serious than any of those Beach Party movies, which
Well,
were,
and he's,
yeah,
for his part, like, I mean, I'm not going to say that like Frankie Avalon was the most amazing actor ever, but he's quite good in this. Like,
yeah,
I think the deficiencies of the movie, like, he's not really one of them, other than the fact that he doesn't quite gel with the rest of these kids. But
And he's also not there to play Frankie Avalon.
right,
Like, by
yeah,
the nature of him being there, he is that, right? But it's not like, hey, I'm gonna pull out a guitar, like all the stuff you could have
right,
done to
right. You're right. Yeah,
break to Avalon it up, I guess.
yeah.
He doesn't pull out a guitar. He doesn't talk about,
He doesn't
yeah,
sing
when I came from
because Frankie was a
California.
singer originally. Yeah,
Yeah,
he
when I
doesn't do
came
any of
from
that.
California to London, I didn't, he's not there to be Frankie Avalon, the surf star.
Yeah.
He's like, and so that's interesting. Also, by the way, whenever he's in the haunted house at any time, it made me wish like that I knew that somewhere along the way there was a pitch for this character, Frankie Avalon, or this, how Frankie Avalon plays it. Like, hey, we should do a Scooby-Doo movie. Because at
Mhm.
the time, Scooby-Doo would have been fairly new, right?
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
And so, like, I just gotta wonder if there's Frankie Avalon as Fred. Of course, he's not blonde, right? But like his whole style and the way he operates in the haunted house is super Fred vibes
Yes.
all the
he
way
is
around.
just one ascot away from being Fred. I mean, you're not
But
wrong.
like how he approached, like everything I was watching, I was like, because that would have been interesting at the time, because they would have, since it was Scooby-Doo kind of new, it would have been like, hey, there's this cartoon, would you play this character? And watching him play all the haunted house scenes, it would have worked fabulously, in my opinion.
What I think is really
was-
interesting. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
You asked about the age appropriateness. Was he much older than the rest of the kids in this
Well,
movie?
I really actually am not sure. Frankie was born in 1940. So he is that makes him what? 30 here, basically.
Yeah,
No,
well,
no.
he's 5 years. So if he was born in 1940, he's 5 years older than Jill Hayworth, who plays Sheila, his part, his significant other in that thing. He is. Let's see, who else do we want to know about? Sylvia Gina Warwick is 1942, so she's 2 years younger than him. So he's a little bit older, but not.
No, so he's fine. I mean, yeah, he
I was that much older. I am that much older than Jamie. So like,
that's
Yeah.
quite common. So that's
weird at all.
not weird at all. If you said,
Right.
"Hey, I'm dating somebody 5 years older," nobody gives a shit. So
Right,
so
because they're
that's
not. It's not that
weird.
they're all like in high school. They're adults.
But they're kind of written like they're all in high school.
Well,
Right.
They do
except for
feel
that they
like
all-
they're
written-
just like early college, I would
yeah,
say.
early
Like,
college. Yeah.
They-
So he's like, he's just a little bit older than probably would have been.
I think it's aspirational. I think you're supposed to go into the movie and go, boy, I wish these were my friends. They seem like cool people. They have money to burn. They're just laying around. They have jobs, but not serious jobs. They're like, it's a pretty groovy life, right? Except for they're bored by it because all they apparently ever do is hang out in nightclubs and have parties. The thing I want to point out career wise, because Drew, I think you're onto something really interesting. Frankie is at the end of a supernova. I mean, it's a really weird situation where Frankie was a huge pop star, so like Venus, right? Big hit, like in whatever 59 or 60. And then he did those beach party movies, and those things happen even though, there was a point where the beach party movies didn't exist. And then in 1963, Frankie and Annette existed, and they existed for about 4 years tops. And then it was over. But they were such a an atomic bomb that after that, if you were Frankie Avalon, you were forever Frankie Avalon. If somebody was going to do a sketch on the Carol Burnett show, what do you call the guy on the surfboard? You called him Frankie. So I think it's now 4 years after the end of the Surf Party films, and what the hell is Frankie Avalon now, right? And I tell you what he is. It's 1969. In 1978, he will show up as the teen angel in Grease. And then Frankie will discover what he is, which is a guy who will be perpetually for the rest of his career commenting on Frankie Avalon. So this is the end of it, really. This is the last hurrah. Is maybe I'll do a horror movie. So yeah.
Yep.
It's such a double-edged sword too, because what happens a lot is, well, I guess I'll do these horror movies. As if horror, I guess maybe the casting, the barrier to entry is different, but sometimes it's kind of a bummer to be thought of like, well, if nothing else, I can at least do horror, considering that. I don't know.
Well, and remember, the studio put him there. I mean,
no, of course,
he's
but there's
like, what do we do
an
with
institutional
you? Yeah.
kind of like demonizing of horror as well. If nothing else, I guess you can do this.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I don't know. It just kind of sucks that I think it's changed, right? But it's still a thing that was pretty prevalent. I think it still happens sometimes, because you'll see like, oh, they'll end up in this low budget horror movie.
Yes.
And and it's cool. I mean, do what you want, and also it's cool that people get roles, right? Like, by no means,
you get work.
Sure. But it sometimes is just, like I said, it's just kind of a bummer that it's thought of that way.
Yeah. I mean, look, we should all be so lucky as to be Frankie Avalon, right?
Sure.
I mean that's a guy who's a part of American pop culture. Nobody doesn't know who Frankie is, and it's been a damn long time since those movies. On the other hand, I'll bet you that in 1969 or 1970, it was probably a little challenging to figure out, what are you going to do? Like in the words of Body Snatchers, where are you going to go when there's no one like you left? Let's get to the most important sequence, really, which is I won't go into it too much, because I'd love for you guys to talk about it more, especially Drew, since you're so enamored of it. But one thing I will mention is that there is a thing that Quentin Tarantino has called the miso crazy speech, which is in any movie where a character is revealed to be the bad guy. Usually it's somebody goes over to their boyfriend's place and they go, my God, all the doctors in that hospital have been trying to kill me for days, and it's just because I found that one memo that people were trying to erase. What are we going to do now? And he goes, and the boyfriend will say, well, let me make you a drink. And then he starts making a speech that reveals that he was the bad guy all along. And Tarantino calls that the miso crazy speech, because the actor has to do a 180 and reveal themselves to be completely freaking nuts. And you get one of those here. But what's good about what Michael Armstrong does is that it takes a damn long time for you to really be certain what you're watching. But yeah, Drew, you were going to talk about this sequence.
Well, the way it's shot is fascinating, because you have the Frankie Avalon character, and what is this kid's name again, Jason?
Richard. You're talking about
Richard,
right? Yes.
Talking, and Richard is the one that previously, brought everyone to the house, and he's talking about how he got lost in the basement of this house for 3 days as a kid, and
in the dark.
And you the way it's shot, like somebody pulls out a knife.
Yes.
but you don't know if it's Frankie Avalon's character or Steven holding the knife for the longest time. Like it lingers on it.
Because the way they do it is a hand slowly pulls the knife from its hiding place. You just see the hand. And then the knife appears out of the bottom of the screen between the two of them. And neither one of them looks at the knife. Like they just kind of look at each other and this knife is between them. And you're just like, and it looks like it's actually pointing toward, or, you know,
it's a weird knife.
Yeah, it's
so
a weird
you
knife.
Can't tell.
So it looks like the sharp edge might be pointing toward Richard, and that would mean Frankie Avalon's holding it, but it's unclear. And then it turns out that it's actually Richard holding it. But that was really effective. You're just like,
I was wrapped with the tension during this, and I think it's frankly the best acting of Frankie Avalon's entire career.
I'm grinning ear to ear because this is such a wonderful sequence. It's so good. It is so good. Yes.
And I were to say, like, if you know, someone was listening to this and they were on the fence about watching the movie, this is what makes the movie worth watching. Like everything else is kind of build up for this one sequence.
Well, and
up until this amazing.
Up until this point, I had been saying that the actor who played Richard kind of seemed like his eyes were dead. Like he just seemed like he didn't seem to be animated. And then I realized, oh, this is like an Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates thing going on with this guy, you know, because the whole thing is that he's kind of dissociating is why he looks like that. Because once he, you know, because he talks about how whenever there's a full moon, it affects him. And Frankie Avalon had said some dumbass thing about how people, when they have like whatever, when their adrenaline is, or whatever he says about that, they can be like super strong just because whatever reason, I don't know. And so then the guy's like, sometimes the full moon can affect people, like what you were saying about the being super strong. And he said that it's because whenever he was stuck in the basement, it was the full moon that would give him light and he'd be like, okay. And so now that's what apparently turns on his like murderousness. So at one point, a cloud covers the moon, and he suddenly starts freaking out because it's dark, and he's like screaming and trying to just crawl out of the house and get out. But anyway, that's after this scene.
I should mention that Julian Barnes. I just want to mention that Julian Barnes lives yet, and he has played. He's just everywhere. I mean, he was in Pacific Rim. I think he's a general or something. He's on Days of Our Lives as a butler. I mean, this guy is everywhere. You know, he was on so many television shows. So out of everybody in this movie, Julian Barnes just continues to rock on. So good for him.
But I'm calling him British Norman Bates, because that's what to me it was. It was like
definitely
flipped on.
It definitely seems like they were influenced by Psycho. Like I think you're right on about the way that the choices made with this character. You know, and the performances are so strong here that it just draws you into it. You know, and it's almost like a play for a few moments, because it's just two characters. There's the set and their interactions, because they contrive to have the blonde girl whose name escapes me, Gwen Stacy, we'll call her, wander off, and you know, like it, you know, I legitimately just found that this was hypnotic. Like this is why I watch movies here for a few minutes. And you know, like if the rest of the movie, if the way we've made this sound made it sound tiresome, I suggest that you just fast forward and watch this whole scene because like, well, I really do think that this scene, just as a piece in of itself, is a masterful piece of filmmaking. And while the rest of the movie has a lot of flaws, like this this one scene really just is so perfect. It, like, you know, the rest, you know, what happens afterwards, you know, to Julia's point, like, it's, I like the ending, but I don't, if that makes any sense. Like, it is a bit, I like how cynical it is.
Tell me more. You're talking about Frankie First of all, please forgive me, and I know these are deep spoilers, but does Frankie Avalon get stabbed in the nuts? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yes. Frankie
Okay.
Avalon
or maybe
gets
not the
stabbed
nuts.
in-
It's like in just like right above, like in the
Right
pelvis.
above,
Sure, in the
yeah,
pelvis.
like it's
in the
close.
pelvis.
It's
Yeah.
a terrible place to get stabbed because
Either way.
there's lots of all kinds of vital
lot
organs.
of work.
Sure.
Yeah. Blah. I mean, that's a pretty grisly stabbing, almost completely out of left field from the rest of the movie.
Yeah, what's her face around until she falls down the stairs.
Yeah.
And does she say she breaks her back, or does she say she breaks her leg?
She just says, I can't move. I don't think she says why. She just says, I can't
Yeah.
move, and then he's gonna kill her, and that's when the moon thing happens.
And the
where he's
police are
just-
showing up too.
But he
Yeah,
didn't care about that. That's not because he's clearly in murderous mode. He's not
Oh
gonna,
yeah.
it's only
But,
when the moon covers, when the cloud
So
covers.
then
the
he
moon,
runs
like,
out into the
runs out.
woods screaming, and that's it. I mean,
they
she lives. So
I
yes.
love how cynical the ending of this movie is.
Say more
Like,
things about that. Like, why do you feel? I'm not saying I disagree with you. I just hadn't really thought of it that way. Like,
the
why?
bad guy gets away.
Oh.
We don't know if he's going to get caught or not.
Oh.
You know,
Right.
he probably will, because he doesn't exactly seem like, you know, Professor Moriarty. But like,
Right.
the open-endedness of it feels like a precursor to like John Carpenter to me in a lot of ways. Like, I found some of the things I found interesting about this movie is, you know, kind of where it falls, you know, in the development of slasher movies, and how yes, it's a movie where, you know, attractive young people get killed with sharp objects, but it doesn't you know, it has some of the tropes, and the ending definitely feels like something that could have come out in like the 70s or 80s.
Yes.
But the you know, when we think about, I think if you're to say, you know, tell me what a slasher movie is, you know, I think people are going to go to like, you know, Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street, which have these, you know, sort of larger than life, almost, you know, universal monsters type characters in them. And, you know, whereas this movie has, you know, there's nothing larger than life about this character. Like, he's just a broken down person who's you know, he's sick. You know, the sort of larger than life slasher movie villain that you know, I think the genre is associated with, like, that didn't really start to exist until like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then later on Halloween. And this movie has none of that, because it's in this sort of developmental stage of, you know, horror movie history. Like, you know, Hammer's still putting out their gothic horror films
for a couple more years after this.
Yeah, and The Exorcist hasn't even come out yet. So like, what we think of as like modern horror movies don't really exist. But this movie is more modern in some ways, in the way that it's like a descendant of Psycho, but it's still like half baked of what slasher movies end up being.
Right.
So that's interesting to me, as somebody who has watched like a metric fuck ton of horror movies. Like I like, sometimes I just like seeing something as like an evolution, a piece in the evolutionary chain, which is what this definitely is.
That's a wonderful way to put it. Like, this is part of the road to the slasher, really. So that brings us to the end, and I would like to get our final thoughts here, and then go on to our endorsements. But if there's anything that we missed and that we should have discussed about Haunted House of Horror, bring it up. So let's go through the same order: Julia, Tony, Drew, and then I'll go. Julia, have we given proper respect to the film that is The Haunted House of Horror?
I think so. I feel like, especially given that it's basically two films, when you consider that, one the
Yeah,
one
the
group
tremendous
shot one
studio.
film. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Um,
distressing, isn't it? By the
mm,
way, to think that we don't really know what we're looking at here. That we don't know. Like it's clearly a movie, but we know that this is not quite the movie that was made, which is very strange. Anyway, go.
by the way, Psycho was 1960.
All right, very good.
Um,
Yes,
yeah. So, no, I think that we hit on pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. I did think, like I said, that the characters were kind of interesting. I actually didn't hate them as much as the other guys did. I liked how freewheeling everybody is about relations. Like they're just kind of like, oh, like at the beginning, the guy who ends up dead, whose name is escaping me,
Gary,
Gary,
lovely
is
Gary.
like,
Yes,
oh, well, I'm gonna be at the party, and I guess I can pick you up. And Sheila's like, or not Sheila, the other girl.
Sylvia.
No, but it wasn't Sylvia either. There's so many. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The point is, he's with one girl.
Well, he's with Dorothy, the blonde Dorothy.
Yes, Dorothy, that's
And
her. He's
yeah,
with Dorothy at lunch, and then he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna be meeting up with Sylvia, but then I'll see you. I'll pick you up at the party." She's like, "No, you'll be stoned." And he goes, "You mean I'll be drunk?" Or like he doesn't. He's not correcting her, but he says, "You think you'll be drunk?" or something like that. So I thought that was interesting, and I wonder actually when stoned came to mean marijuana instead of alcohol, because apparently, or at least I don't know. It seemed like
mm,
at least for the British that was what that meant. But
yeah,
anyway,
good
she's like,
question.
"Yeah, I'll just see you at the party. It's fine." So then so he's at the party. Sure enough, he's super drunk. He's in bed. Sylvia comes up and it's like hitting on him, and he's like, "Well, I'll see you tomorrow." And then because I'm with Dorothy tonight, and it's just like it's all so very cash, like nobody's going steady. They're
Although
just kind of back and forth between. What? Go ahead.
although Sylvia is basically like, "Oh, you're drunk? Cool. I mean,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
can take
Yeah,
care of
Sylvia's
I can."
definitely.
You're like, "Whoa, Sylvia,
Well, I mean,
that's
she's
not
also been
cool."
sleeping with a married man. I mean, she's obviously like
Yeah,
her morals are
yeah,
not
She
necessarily
gets
right,
around.
stellar.
Yeah.
sure.
And then yeah, she's got her little triangle dress that's got lots of side boob in this movie. And anyway, so that whole just the way they are, I thought was kind of interesting. Like just a picture, just a little picture of the party set in London, in you know, in the 1969. So all of that I thought was fun, just as a kind of a like I said, like a snapshot of the time. But other than that, I think we talked about everything. Yeah, I think if I could rewrite the mystery myself, I probably would have been. I might have done a little bit. I don't know, maybe not. But I feel like I could have done a little bit better. Just a rewrite, not necessarily from the scratch, but a rewrite. I think I could probably have
Mm.
improved it a little bit, but maybe not. Maybe I'm believing in myself more than I more than I should.
No,
But
I
yeah, I definitely just thought that there was a lot of
well,
plot points
presumably
that
the
really
original
needed.
script is out there, so somebody could
Oh, I
shoot
know.
it
I'd love
if
to see
they
that.
were like, who is today's Frankie Avalon that we could put into a slasher like this. The Bloomhouse should snap this up in a second.
Yeah.
Tony, should Bloomhouse remake A Haunted House of Horror? Is
I mean,
that
I think
something?
by now you've got. I mean, it's not when it came out. It is this thing that it is, right? With
Yeah.
Frankie Avalon, but I don't know if remaking this. I mean, who knows? If I don't know what it would get you. I guess is where we're
Really
really
solid
where I'm
question.
at. Like, also, as somebody, when you brought it up and as somebody's hadn't had one of their works rewritten by people that didn't want to rewrite it.
Mm,
I'm like, I know we mentioned that before, but
yeah.
that's also a bummer. Like now, kind of some of the weird pacing kind of makes sense, and the back
Yeah.
and forth. Also, like you don't find out that they decided to dispose of the body until later. Like, oh, well, we just left it, and then like, no, well, we did a whole cover up thing, and you
Yeah,
find this out through like
we even burned
side.
the evidence.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
this side dialogue that happens later. It makes a lot more sense. The disjointed nature of it makes more sense as
Mhm.
we've been going through it. I think there's a lot to it. I think, like I said, it's really kind of cool to see in what I imagine. Maybe that disjointedness does add to that. It feels more like an Italian movie than it does a British horror movie.
Mm.
And I thought that was interesting. There's a lot of interesting bits, and I think discussing it and the stuff Drew brought up, where hey, if you want to see yet another like a proto slasher or like how like where slashers are and then where they lead to,
Mm.
I think that's also really interesting. Yeah, I don't think to me, it's definitely not a bad movie. It's not one that I would revisit often, but I think there's enough cool stuff in it. And again, kind of adding to, if you're a movie adventurer, you might look at this and see where, hey, these were weird choices, and this was interesting, and how this picture of late swinging 60s, all that stuff is interesting. It's just as a whole, it didn't really gel as well for me. Also, I'm not saying that everybody has to be great. I have to like everybody in a movie, but I had a hard time latching on to anyone that I liked or cared for. And even if they're interesting, but they're interesting, and that's if everybody was boring and that's a sin. Right. But Sylvia, I also wondered if any part of the main character, the Love Witch, was sort of based off of Sylvia, the character of Sylvia in this, because they kind of have a similar vibe in a way. I have no idea. This is perhaps it's me projecting that, but I just kept coming back to that. But it's worth it again to see it's always cool to see some mod movies too. So
oh yeah, I need more mod horror. I absolutely. Thank you very much. And I would love to know if Anna Biller is a fan of this movie. I mean, I think somebody should tweet at her and ask her. Drew, what about you?
I would have first want to state the only one of these kids I outright hated was the guy that he seems like they wanted him to be the comic relief, but he's just kind of abusive to his girlfriend throughout the entire movie. The thing is that this was an 80s movie. That guy would be killed, and we would have catharsis.
Absolutely. He would have been probably killed first.
Well, I was really annoyed that the poor girlfriend, she's getting stuck in the wall. I'm just like, come on.
Yeah,
that's stupid.
It was that I had sympathy for her because her boyfriend was such an ass, but I really outright hated that kid. The rest of them were just they're young people doing young people, I'm not going to judge people for sleeping around. I'm not going to, whatever, but this that guy was just an ass, and I wanted something bad to happen to him. But I think this was an interesting discussion piece. I think that like Tony said, it didn't quite gel together completely for me in a way that I think that I would revisit it too often. But I do have to stress that I think that one scene in the climax is balls to the wall, just brilliant. I do think that the movie is worth watching just for that one scene, because it's glorious. So for that reason alone, I am glad that I watched this movie.
Fantastic. Thank you. I am so glad that we watched this. This one, for reasons that I can't even begin to articulate, this movie is dear to my heart. Mainly, it's just one of the ones, like I said, that when I'm working and I just have a movie running in the background, I often have this going because I think it's just fabulous wallpaper. If you're me and you're very sort of fetishistic about mid-century stuff, this is one of the best swinging 60s London movies that I can think of. Even though those are the worst scenes. So that's the crazy thing about it. It's also got a good trailer, so you should go look for this. So yes, I'm excited that we watched it. Thank you very, very much. It was very kind of you people to go along with my recommendation on this one. So all right, let us get our endorsements, whatever you've been watching, listening to, reading, whatever you want to talk about. And I'd love to hear it. And we will actually be off next week for Thanksgiving, and then we will be back for our Christmas, 3 Christmas episodes in a row, and then taking another break at Christmas. So we'll be gone for a week. So y'all will need to watch Horror House and let us know what you think about it. So, okay, endorsements. Julia, I think we started with you. So, do you have anything for us? If you don't, it's totally cool. I'm realizing I don't know if I
Sure.
have anything.
Oh, I
So,
have.
go ahead.
We've watched a bunch of things together.
True.
No, we went to see The Menu with Ray Fiennes, which mostly and yeah, Taylor Joy. Mostly, I really enjoyed. I was not a fan of the ending so much, but it was interesting. But anyway, really suspenseful, interesting movie. I liked it. We went to see She Said, which is the movie about the Harvey Weinstein coverage by the New York
New York Times.
Times
Yep.
and like how they developed that story and basically the beginning of the Me Too movement. Really great film. And we took in the new season of what's the show called with
Oh,
I
Dead to
just
Me.
blanked. Dead to Me.
Dead to
Thank
Me.
you.
Yeah.
Yes. Really interesting and good. Actually, did we finish I
We
don't think
haven't finished
we
the
haven't
new
finished it yet.
season.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
we had to catch up on the second season because we hadn't watched that, or we hadn't watched all the way through anyway. So, but that's a really good show as well. Lots of twists and turns and interesting character development and stuff. So yeah, I've been having a good time watching stuff this week.
The paratext around that one has been really interesting because Christina Applegate has been very
That's
public
MS. Yeah.
about her MS diagnosis, which has given her mobility issues, and so it's but she's the boss of that show. So they're navigating how to sort of deal with an actor who's beginning to have all kinds of physical challenges, but they're the star of the show, and she continues to be the star of the show, and it's really great. And so that makes it really interesting. Yeah. Thank you very much, Tony. Do you have anything to endorse for us?
Mainly I've been working on and by the way, I'll probably need to find some subs for me because I'll be out on the 30th and maybe for 2 weekends because I'll be in the studio for Deserts of Mars. We're starting to record our album. So I've been mostly working on music all night, all the time, because I got to do, bass and all the vocals and all the lyrics and make sure everything's get done. But I've been watching a lot of B movies on TV and YouTube, and I still there's so much stuff you can just go crazy. It's so interesting to think about how we used to just, you said, hey, I caught this movie. It was when I was at the farmhouse, right? You had to catch it
Yeah,
on some UHF channel, probably.
that's exactly right. Yes, some
And
channel from Tulsa. Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
now we can just, hey, I wonder if that's available. And not everything is. Not everything's available legally,
Yeah.
but I think how you develop your taste can totally change how, like, the availability of things gives people so much different latitude or how you approach film. And speaking of blast from the past, though, the couple things I did find when we were growing up, there were these things called muscle figures, MUSCLE, and I think they called it many unusual small creatures looking everywhere, but
I don't think I remember this.
the little pink weird characters. But what we didn't know, I didn't know because where I grew up it was actually from a manga and anime called Kaneki-man, which
Really?
means muscle man, which means like muscle being meat. Like Kaneki-man
Huh.
is muscle man. It's all these just bizarre wrestlers.
Yeah.
Well, somebody they decided to make a huge hardcover book of every crazy wrestling move in this series. And it's fascinating. Like, and it's so, like, since Ray and I make a decent wage, like I have disposable income where I could go, I'm gonna buy this book about these things that I was so obsessed with as a kid and buy this hardcover book of these crazy looking wrestlers. I mean, they're all like, there's ones that are like building block looking creatures, and one guy has a tank turret on his back. And just, I mean,
I found them, Tony. They're little rubber figures, like
yeah,
like you would get in a
they're like gotcha figures out of
I was gonna say that, like, you go to the restaurant, you have the little coin.
right. Well,
dispenser. Yeah.
in Japan, it's gotcha
Okay.
because gotcha is the onomatopoeia of like cricket kind of. So when you turn it, it goes it's gotcha sound. So gotcha is like, and I've gotten you some of those when I was in Japan, and they range from just, I mean, there's everything. Like somebody posted they went to Japan and there was a gotcha of like a gotcha ball of a like meat strips or meat tape. It's like I mean, all kinds. They run the gamut. But anyway, like there's this book, but also in this, one of the most fascinating things is to offset shipping. I also ordered a Learn English with Fist of the North Star.
Oh my gosh!
And this has been one of my favorite books I bought because on the front cover it has phrases like "Take love with you to hell." As a phrase that, and there's like it's in different sections too, right? So like there's like a couple pages that are listed as romance, and because all of these phrases are from the manga. Right, so in the romance section, it's one of the phrases, because it's got it in Japanese and you're supposed to learn the English. I will carry love for you to my grave, and I will
That's so
only
weird.
protect and watch her just because I love her, which prompted me to possibly try to start a Kickstarter for. I wish I had just time to do this. What I would be fascinated is to learn all of the Japanese versions. So I got it to offset the cost of shipping, but it's been great. But to learn all of these phrases in Japanese and then go to Japan and I can only speak the phrases from this learn English from this North Star book, which would be great because it's got things like, why do you reject my love? A
So
real
it's basically learn English for stalkers.
Yeah, well, that's just that's the quote unquote romance. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff, but when you consider that the main character of Fist of the North Star is, his big catchphrase is "You're already dead."
Jesus,
You can like he's already hit them, and he hits pressure points. Julia, you wouldn't know this, but like basically, this guy can hit pressure points and cause people to explode.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or do all kinds of stuff. But like the idea of learning, it's such a great book because the idea of learning English through a post-apocalyptic martial arts manga.
Sure.
Is
Yeah, it'd be like learning
amazing.
English. Yeah, it'd be like learning English from an Arnold Schwarzenegger action movie. Or
exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Or the Road Warrior, right?
Right.
And I am so happy I live in a world where I could buy a book full of crazy, insane wrestling, just like over the top wrestling moves, and a book about learning English through post-apocalyptic martial arts fantasy.
That's hilarious.
Although I did also buy Rain a pair of Gigi from Kiki's Delivery Service chopsticks.
Nice.
Love it.
But yeah,
I love this idea of this book. I want to. When we get together again, which is bound to happen in time, I've got to see it. I also want to see the Choose Your Own Adventure Staying Alive book. But
I need to digitize that.
Yes, indeed. Yeah,
I posted a couple of pictures, but I'll send you these, Jason. But yeah, I like a world where all of this lives.
That's one of the things I really love, by the way, about archive.org is, until in theory, I only approve of this if something's literally out of print. But if it's out of print, I am so happy when it shows up on archive.org so that you can, so you can read it there. Thank you very much. Drew, what about you?
I have been enjoying something that I actually bought over the summer, but I just haven't had a time to get around to reading. It is a big collection put out by Yo Comics and IDW of Gorgo comics.
Really?
Like the British Godzilla
Yes,
knockoff.
Indeed, of course. Yeah.
Drawn by Spider-Man co-creator Steve Ditko.
What?
Yeah,
I gotta get this.
Yeah, so these comics are amazing and weird in only the way Silver Age comics can be.
Yeah.
And the book itself is beautiful. I want to get some of the other companion pieces to it now because there's a Conga series apparently that was also drawn by Steve Ditko that based off of the British King Kong knockoff, as well as they have a bunch of other monster comics hardcovers that they've put out, but this one has been just a joy to read. I've also spent a large portion of the last week getting caught up on the Borgo Pass horror podcast,
Oh,
which
wonderful. Yeah.
those guys have been on the show, and most of the people here have been on the show at some point, their show at some point. I love the fact that they have a deep focus on classic horror
Yes.
movies, and in particular, like they just put out an episode on Abbott and Costello meets the killer Boris Karloff, which was a fascinating listen. But I also highly recommend listening to their two-parter on King Kong, which was just glorious.
That sounds great.
Finally, I want to recommend even though I watched this movie a few weeks back on Shudder, I want to recommend Deadstream, which is a found footage movie, so your mileage may vary, but it really does a good job of emulating the sort of freewheeling spirit of Evil Dead 2. So like if you can get past the fact that it's a found footage movie, I think that the Evil Dead fans would find a lot to enjoy in it. So those are my three endorsements this week.
That's wonderful. I totally agree with you about Borgo Pass and about everything that Julia said. And just to further mention, the archive.org, they have a whole section on movie tie-in books, which is really great because a lot of those are just impossible to find, and so it's really neat to be able to go on there and find, for instance, the 190-page novelization of Staying Alive is is available on archive.org. I just really love that. Tony, perhaps someday the Choose Your Own Adventure book will find its way to the same place. So we will see. All right, guys, thank you so much. It has been wonderful to talk about this movie with y'all, and enjoy your Thanksgiving. And Tony, I don't know what your schedule is. We will figure it out. But the show will be back with something on the 4th that Drew recommended called Violent Night. So we'll see.
Actually, that was
that
my
was actually
yeah. That was my
That was you.
recommendation. That's the new movie that's coming out.
All right.
Yeah,
right.
I
Violent Night about
recommended
the
a
Santa.
couple of our
Yeah.
I recommended a couple of other Christmas.
Yes.
Yeah, that will
Yeah,
do.
it's gonna be
But-
Christmas all the way. So yes.
Violent Night sounds like also it should be a manga.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Like I could
So-
totally picture.
I will say Violent
Night.
Night's a new film, and it's got David Harbour, so y'all have to check it out. Thank you, everyone. Have a fantastic
Happy
week.
Thanksgiving.
Yes, happy Thanksgiving. Let us know on your page what you thought about this, whether you were able to watch Haunted House of Horror, because I totally recommend it. And also, I want to know something important. I believe that stuffing, like real Thanksgiving stuffing, is not Thanksgiving stuffing unless it has egg whites, gizzards, and liver.
Yeah,
Well,
you're
for
not
me-
having real stuffing this year, sweetie. Sorry.
To me, if it doesn't crunch with mineral goodness, it is not real.
I mean, you enjoy what you enjoy, but
Nope.
that is not my.
It needs a full
Mm-mm.
bag of giblets, basically.
Oh
Jamie
man, no.
Jamie makes what she calls Yankee stuffing. It has none of that in it. It does have bacon and a pound of butter. So
Oh, snap.
it's
I'm not
still
against
pretty
bacon.
That
good.
sounds
I don't-
amazing.
I'm not-
Ours is straight up traditional in our house from per rain, because I was never a huge stuffing person, although I had different people make it. In our house, it is straight up traditional, sometimes hard to find lately, which is weird, stovetop stuffing, but with breakfast sausage, like sausage and stuffing and bell seasoning to give it extra
Also good.
Thanksgivingness.
All of that's good, but it's. I just feel like you need to add some boiled egg whites,
Oh,
liver,
no.
and gizzards.
Yeah, again, you do.
I'm not
man, but
anti
that
the
sounds
I'm not
horrible.
anti the gizzards. I am anti the egg whites because why?
Well, they're boiled egg whites, right?
Yeah,
So
it
so
doesn't seem
it's
necessary.
Oh, I know what you. Oh, I know where you're getting at, and I've had that without the.
It's just a total like
No, I
southern.
got
It's
you.
just
I
a
got.
good old
I
boy way of doing it. It
I
is.
To
know what you're
me,
talking
when I think of stuffing, I think of traditional cornbread stuffing like my mom made, which
Mhm.
Sure.
did not have egg whites in it, interesting, or at least not to my knowledge.
Right.
But I think what stuffing changes drastically from region to region, because
Yeah.
like what Jamie grew up with was basically torn apart French bread.
How interesting.
And she's
Wow.
from New York, and that's how they roll. But
Yeah. Well, there's got to be
so
somebody on our page who's like, no, I know what Jason's talking about, and I
No, I know more about what you're. I get it, but I am not a giblets.
I'm also
livers
one of those
kind of
people who
person.
believes that if that a proper a proper cranberry sauce needs to be in the shape of a can with like the ridges around it, or
That's our
else.
household.
Well, the cranberry sauce from the can is the best cranberry sauce.
I think
Like
even if you make it
people,
yourself, you should mold it in a can shape.
bougie cranberry sauce makes me cry. But
That would be amazing, actually. Like to see some show where they take and they make the super deluxe cranberry sauce with artisanal everything.
Yes.
And then the final step is to put it in a can and let it congeal. And then when they bring it back out to the table, it's like in can shape. That
Right.
I'm sure somebody's done that, but that sounds amazing. I hope that happens more often.
Yes. Wonderful.
But the correct way to eat anything on Thanksgiving is just large portions. That's the correct way.
Yeah.
That's like it's all correct as long as you eat a lot of it.
That is.
I like that
hilarious.
our endorsements have turned to.
Well, this makes me happy.
Endorsing how to
If
make
people
our
know their own
Thanksgiving.
hearts, they could have left long ago, and if they did, that's okay. But if they're still here,
But
No, that's awesome.
if FOMO has kept you here, then
yes.
All I know
Here's our
is
Thanksgiving.
you're welcome.
All I know is that when I control Thanksgiving, I forgo turkey and make brisket.
Oh.
Oh snap! I'm with
Oh.
you. And I can make a good turkey, but I'm with you actually.
Beef always beats turkey, always.
That sounds like an asylum film. Beef Mageddon meets turkey to puss.
Turkey Ploticus.
All right. I think that's quite enough, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Lava Shark.
everybody.
Strike
Yes.
another one.
I am thankful for this conversation. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
That also could end up in Halloween, man, Drew.
Yes.
Beef Mageddon meets
it's all
turkey.
just I'm just collecting materials.
It'll be the title will be Gizzards. And all right. Adios. Bye.
Night, everybody.
Night.